My mom slapped me across the face for writing a 6 in my mood log, then said, "How dare you be twice as happy as the mother who gave up everything for you?" When I confronted her years later about the damage she'd done, she smirked and said, "Happy children become broken adults. I saved you." I just stared at her. That was 16 months ago. This morning, she saw something on her phone, went completely still, and hasn't eaten since, by making sure they were never even there. For as long as I can remember, my mother had a pathological need to make me miserable. And to do this, she invented the mood log system. She made us both keep hourly mood logs, where we'd compare how we were feeling, and if I ever reported being happier than she was for whatever reason, she'd punish me until the scales balanced. You see, my mother believed happiness was a lie people told themselves before life crushed them. She'd grown up wealthy and pretty, gotten everything she wanted, then lost it all when Dad left her for his secretary. Instead of recovering, she decided her pain had taught her the truth about life and needed to pass this wisdom to me. She saw my natural optimism as dangerous naivety that would get me hurt like she'd been hurt. "Happy children become broken adults," she'd say, watching me laugh with friends like I was playing with fire. After Dad left, she made it her mission to prepare me for disappointment by ensuring I never experienced joy in the first place. The day after Dad moved out, Mom presented me with 2 leather journals and a laminated chart. "We're going to track our happiness every hour," she announced, showing me her scale from 1 to 10. "At the end of each day, we compare. Your number can never be higher than mine." She'd already rated herself at a 3 for the day because of the divorce. I stupidly wrote down a 6 because I was relieved the fighting would stop. Mom saw my number and slapped me across the face. "How dare you be twice as happy as the mother who gave up everything for you?" That night, I went to bed hungry, my first punishment for the crime of feeling okay. The mood logs consumed our entire existence. Mom would wake up, rate herself a 2 or 3 depending on her dreams about Dad, then hide her number from me and wait for mine like a predator. If I matched her score or went lower, she'd nod and make breakfast. If I went even 1 point higher, the punishment started immediately. Canceled plans, confiscated books, destroyed belongings, all while she explained how much harder her life was than mine. I tried just putting ones all the time because that seemed safest, but she called me out on that immediately. "You want to see what living at a 1 feels like?" she said, dragging me down to the basement. "I'll show you a 1. I learned to read her moods like my life depended on it because it did. Bags under her eyes meant she'd be a 3, so I'd better be a 2. Good weather might bump her to a 4, giving me breathing room to be a 3, but I could never predict the sudden drops. She'd get a parking ticket and plummet to a 1, then race home to check my last log. If I'd written anything above a 1 in the past hour, she'd lose it. The really sick part was watching her sabotage her own happiness to keep me down. She'd reject job offers, end friendships, anything that might improve her mood and give me permission to feel better. When her sister invited us for Christmas, Mom declined because happy families would skew our numbers. She needed to stay miserable to keep me miserable. We were both drowning, but she was the one holding us underwater, and I couldn't figure out how to make her let go. I decided if she wanted me miserable, I'd give her exactly what she asked for. I started logging zeros across the board. Not 1s, not 2s, absolute zeros with detailed explanations. 0 because I want to end my life. 0 because I dream about you dying. 0 because I haven't felt joy in 2 years. She told me over and over again to stop, that 0 wasn't an option, but whenever she punished me for it, I told her that she was making me feel worse and threatened to start putting down negative numbers. When I stayed at 0 for 2 weeks straight, she panicked and bumped her own numbers up to 4s and 5s, trying to give me permission to improve. But I kept writing zeros. She screamed at me to be happier, which was insane considering she'd spent years punishing me for exactly that. I refused. 0, 0, 0. Mom tried to force my numbers up by love bombing me with gifts and privileges, but I kept logging zeros, so she switched tactics and decided we'd be zeros together. She quit her job, stopped paying bills, and let the house fall apart around us. "If you want to live at 0, we'll live at 0, she said, canceling my college applications and throwing away my acceptance letters. She stopped buying food, stopped cleaning, stopped bathing, dragging us both into actual rock bottom. When I still wouldn't budge from 0, she started hurting herself in front of me, cutting her arms and asking, "What's your number now? Still think you're as low as I am?" But I'd learned from the master. I looked at her bleeding arms, wrote another 0, and added, "Because you're doing this to yourself." She wanted me to break, to admit I was happier than her, but I'd rather die at 0 than give her that satisfaction. The next morning, Mom dragged herself out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen table where I sat with my mood log. Her hair hung in greasy strands around her face, and the cuts on her arms had scabbed over into ugly red lines. She grabbed my journal before I could finish writing and stared at the row of zeros stretching back weeks. Her hands shook as she flipped through page after page of nothing. 0 after 0 after 0, each one accompanied by increasingly dark explanations. She slammed the journal down and grabbed her own, scribbling frantically. When she showed me her entry, she'd written a 10, a Tizadic. The woman who'd spent years telling me happiness was a lie had just claimed perfect bliss while standing in our decaying kitchen with self-inflicted wounds on her arms. I picked up my pen and wrote another 0. She lunged across the table and ripped the pen from my hand, then started writing in my journal herself. 7, she wrote. 8, 9. She filled in hours of fake entries, her handwriting getting sloppier with each number. I watched her forge my happiness like she was writing a ransom note. When she finished, she shoved the journal back at me and waited. I took the pen, crossed out every number she'd written, and replaced them with zeros. Mom swept everything off the table in one violent motion. Journals, pens, dishes crashed to the floor. She stood there panting, looking at the mess, then bent down and started picking up the pieces with her bare hands. A broken plate sliced her palm, and she just kept cleaning, blood mixing with old food on the linoleum. I got up and went to my room, leaving her there on her hands and knees. An hour later, she appeared in my doorway with bandaged hands and a new plan. "We were going to therapy," she announced, "a specialist who could fix my emotional numbness." The therapist's office smelled like vanilla candles and disappointment. Mom had clearly coached Dr. Catherine on what to say, because she launched immediately into questions about my zeros. Why did I insist on rating myself so low? Didn't I understand how this affected my mother? I sat in silence for the full 50 minutes. Mom filled the quiet with lies about how I'd always been a difficult child, how the mood logs were meant to help us communicate better, how my zeros were a form of manipulation. Dr. Catherine nodded and took notes, occasionally glancing at me with practiced concern. When our time ended, Dr. Catherine handed me a new mood chart with smiley faces instead of numbers. "Sometimes a visual representation helps," she said. I took the chart, drew an X through every face, and handed it back. Mom scheduled 3 sessions a week. I attended every one and said nothing. After a month of silence, Dr. Catherine suggested individual sessions, but Mom refused. She needed to be there to make sure I was telling the truth. The truth was that Mom had created a prison where honesty meant punishment, and lies meant survival. She'd turned feelings into weapons and wondered why I'd gone numb. Every therapy session became another another battleground where she tried to force me to admit I felt something, anything, above 0. I started leaving my mood log in obvious places, open to the current day. Zeros lined up like tombstones, each one a small act of war. Mom would find them and add her own comments in the margins. This is culling me. Please stop. I'm trying to help you. But she wasn't trying to help. She was trying to win. The zeros drove her crazy because they broke her system. She couldn't punish me for being happier if I refused to be happy. She couldn't control my emotions if I claimed not to have any. She tried everything. Surprise parties with family members I hadn't seen in years. I sat through them stone-faced, then logged another 0. Expensive gifts that appeared on my bed with notes begging me to just try. I donated them unopened and logged zeros. She even adopted a puppy, thinking I couldn't resist. I fed it, walked it, and logged zeros while it licked my face. The sicker she got, the stronger I felt. Every 0 was a tiny victory, proof that she couldn't break me anymore. I'd found the one weapon she had no defense against, complete emotional withdrawal. She'd created a game where the only winning move was not to play. School became my refuge. I'd leave the house at dawn and stay until they kicked me out, doing homework in empty classrooms and helping teachers clean their rooms. Anything to avoid going home to her increasingly desperate attempts to provoke a response. One teacher, Mrs. Sebastian, noticed I was always the last to leave. She started keeping her classroom open later, claiming she needed to grade papers but really just giving me somewhere to exist. We never talked about why I couldn't go home. She just made sure I had somewhere else to be. Mom figured out I was avoiding her and started showing up at school. She'd pull me out of class for appointments that were really just drives around town while she sobbed and begged me to write down any number but 0. There's something deeply disturbing about a mother who turns emotions into a competition where only she can win. I wonder what twisted logic makes someone believe that keeping their child miserable is actually protecting them. I'd sit in the passenger seat, watching familiar streets pass by, and plan my escape. College was my only way out, but she'd thrown away my acceptance letters. I started researching community colleges, ones I could afford without her help. I forged her signature on financial aid forms, and had the responses sent to Mrs. Sebastian's classroom. Mom must have sensed I was planning something because she escalated again. She stopped going to therapy and started spending the money on stranger and stranger attempts to fix me. Crystal healers, life coaches, even a psychic who claimed my chakras were blocked. I sat through each appointment, logged my zeros, and counted down the days until I turned 18. The mood logs had become a stack of journals documenting our mutual destruction. Hers showed wild swings between fake 10s and genuine ones, each number a lie designed to manipulate mine. Mine showed nothing but zeros, a flat line of defiance that grew stronger with each passing day. She tried one last, desperate move. She burned all the mood logs in the backyard, years of documentation going up in smoke. Fresh start, she said, handing me a new journal. We can pretend the zeros never happened, but I didn't need to pretend. The zeros had happened. They'd saved me. While she'd been focused on controlling my numbers, I'd been building a life she couldn't touch. Secret bank accounts, admission letters, friends who would let me crash when things got bad. The zeros weren't surrender, they were armor. I took the new journal and wrote my first entry, 0, because that's what she taught me I was worth, and I'd learned to make it my strength. She wanted me to feel nothing, so I gave her nothing. She wanted me empty, so I became untouchable. The real tragedy was that somewhere under all her sickness, she probably did love me, but she twisted that love into something poisonous, turned it into a weapon she used to try to protect me from pain by causing it first. She thought she was saving me from the world's disappointments by becoming the biggest disappointment in my life. I kept writing zeros because they were the only honest thing left between us. Every other number would be a lie, a performance, a manipulation. 0 was pure. 0 was true. 0 was the only thing she'd left me with, and I turned it into the key to my freedom. Mom stared at the new 0 I'd written, her face cycling through emotions like a broken television. She grabbed the journal and hurled it across the kitchen, then immediately scrambled after it, smoothing out the crumpled pages with trembling hands. The puppy whimpered from its bed in the corner, sensing the tension that had become our household's permanent atmosphere. She disappeared into her bedroom and emerged with a stack of photo albums, spreading them across the kitchen table. Baby pictures, birthday parties, family vacations from before Dad left. She pointed at each image, tapping my smiling face with her bandaged finger, leaving small bloodstains on the glossy surfaces. Her eyes begged me to remember feeling something other than 0. I picked up my pen and added another entry to the log, 0, with the note, old photos of a different child. Mom swept the albums to the floor and stormed out. Through the window, I watched her pace the backyard where smoke still rose from the burned journals. She kicked at the ashes, sending black flakes swirling into the air. When she came back inside, soot streaked her face like war paint. The next phase of her campaign began immediately. She called relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, scheduling visits without asking me. My aunt arrived first, carrying casseroles and concerned looks. She sat across from me at the kitchen table while Mom hovered behind her, mouthing words I was supposed to say. My aunt talked about her own children, their accomplishments, their happiness. She showed me pictures on her phone, each swipe revealing another smiling cousin at graduations, weddings, vacations. Mom watched my face for any flicker of envy or longing. I maintained eye contact with my aunt and nodded politely, then excused myself to log another 0. More relatives followed. Uncles who tried to engage me in conversations about sports, cousins who attempted to reconnect over shared childhood memories, my grandmother who cried into her tea while asking what had happened to her sweet granddaughter. Mom orchestrated each visit like a director, positioning people for maximum emotional impact. During my uncle's visit, Mom produced a guitar from the basement, the one I'd played before the mood log started. He strummed familiar songs while she watched me, waiting for music to crack my armor. I sat through 3 songs, then logged my 0 and went to my room. I heard the guitar hit the wall shortly after. She escalated to bringing in my former friends, kids I'd been close to before I'd learned that friendship meant punishment when they made me laugh. They showed up confused, clearly coached by Mom to act like nothing had changed. We sat in awkward circles in the living room while they talked about school, parties, inside jokes I no longer understood. One friend, Sarah, tried harder than the others. She brought photos from middle school before everything went wrong, pictures of us at sleepovers making silly faces, covered in face paint at the school carnival. Mom practically vibrated with anticipation as Sarah spread them out. I looked at each photo carefully, then thanked Sarah for coming and showed her to the door. Mom's next strategy involved flooding me with sensory experiences. She cooked elaborate meals, filling the house with the smell of my former favorite foods, lasagna, chocolate chip cookies, homemade bread. The scents triggered memories of happier times, but I ate mechanically and logged my zeros between bites. She played movies we used to watch together, comedies that once made us both laugh until we cried. I sat through them stone-faced while she watched me instead of the screen, her own laughter forced and hollow. When the credits rolled, I'd log another 0 and she'd switch to a different movie, desperate to find the one that would break through. Music came next. She played songs from from my childhood, pop hits from better years, even lullabies she'd sung when I was small. The house became a constant soundtrack of attempted emotional manipulation. I learned to move through the noise like it was weather, just another environmental condition to endure. The puppy became her primary weapon. She trained it to bring me toys, to curl up in my lap, to lick my face whenever I sat down. The little creature tried so hard to love me into feeling something. I cared for it responsibly, feeding and walking it on schedule, but refused to let Mom see any attachment. The zeros continued. She started leaving gifts in increasingly obvious places. Art supplies appeared on my desk, books by authors I used to love materialized on my nightstand, clothes in styles I'd admired before the logs began hung in my closet. Each gift came with a note begging me to rate my happiness at receiving it. I donated everything and logged zeros. Mom's health deteriorated as her desperation grew. She stopped eating regular meals, surviving on coffee and whatever she grabbed while planning her next attempt. Dark circles deepened under her eyes, her hair grew brittle and thin, the cuts on her arms healed into raised scars that she'd trace absently while staring at me. She hired a meditation instructor who promised to unlock my inner joy. We sat in lotus positions on the living room floor while he guided us through visualizations of happy places. Mom's eyes stayed open, watching to see if I'd relax into the exercise. I breathed steadily and logged my zero the moment he left. A nutritionist came next, convinced my emotional numbness stemmed from dietary imbalances. She put me on a regimen of supplements and mood-boosting foods. Mom watched me swallow each med, checked that I ate every prescribed meal. After 2 weeks of perfect compliance and continued zeros, the nutritionist admitted defeat. Mom turned to religion, despite never being particularly spiritual. She dragged me to churches, synagogues, even a Buddhist temple. Religious leaders prayed over me, blessed me, tried to counsel me about finding joy in faith. I sat respectfully through each service, then logged my zeros in the car afterward. She organized interventions with increasing frequency. Groups of concerned adults would ambush me in the living room, taking turns explaining how my zeros hurt them. Teachers, neighbors, distant relatives I'd met twice. They'd share how my numbness affected their lives, how much they wanted to see me happy. Mom would cry on cue, and everyone would wait for me to break down and admit I felt something. I developed a routine for these interventions. Sit quietly, maintain eye contact, nod occasionally, wait for them to exhaust themselves, log my zero, return to my room. The groups grew smaller as people realized their participation changed nothing. Mom started documenting everything with a video camera, convinced that if I saw myself being emotionless, I'd snap out of it. She filmed me eating breakfast, doing homework, sitting in silence, then she'd play the footage back, providing commentary on how disturbing it was to watch. I watched myself watching myself and logged another zero. She brought in a dance instructor, remembering how I'd loved ballet as a child. We stood at the bar in the living room, Mom filming while the instructor guided me through positions. My body remembered the movements, but my face remained blank. The instructor left early, unnerved by my mechanical precision. Mom tried exposure therapy without calling it that. She'd create situations designed to force emotional responses, surprise visits to places I'd loved, unexpected encounters with people who'd mattered to me, calculated attempts to trigger nostalgia or longing. Mom's turning their house into some weird game show where the prize is making her daughter feel something, anything, except she keeps losing every single round. I moved through each experience like a ghost, present but untouchable. She started sleeping outside my door, afraid I'd hurt myself in the night despite my zeros being about emptiness, not self-harm. I'd step over her in the morning on my way to the bathroom, and she'd scramble up to check my mood log immediately. The zeros never changed, but she kept checking. Physical activity became her next focus. She signed me up for sports, convinced endorphins would override my numbness. Soccer, swimming, track. She attended every practice, every meet, watching for signs of competitive spirit or team bonding. I participated fully but mechanically, logging zeros in the locker room. Mom's sister started visiting more frequently, concerned about both of us. She'd pull Mom aside for whispered conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. Words like professional help and inpatient treatment drifted from the kitchen. Mom would emerge from these talks more determined than ever to fix me herself. She tried reverse psychology, announcing she no longer cared about the mood logs. She made a big show of throwing away the charts, declaring us both free from the system. But I saw her checking my journal when she thought I was asleep, saw her face crumble at each new zero. The performance lasted 3 days before she reinstated official logging. Bribery became more elaborate. She offered to let me redecorate my room, to get a car when I turned 16, to go on any vacation I wanted. Each offer came with the implicit understanding that I'd need to show happiness to receive it. I declined everything and logged my zeros. She enrolled us in family activities she thought might spark joy through togetherness. Pottery classes where we sat side by side shaping clay, cooking lessons where we learned to make pasta from scratch, even a weekend camping trip where she hoped nature would heal us. I participated in everything, completed every activity, and logged zero after zero. Mom started bringing home books about emotional disorders, highlighting passages she wanted me to read, stories of recovery, testimonials from people who'd overcome numbness, scientific explanations for anhedonia. She'd leave them open on my pillow, bookmarked to relevant chapters. I'd move them aside and add another zero to my log. The house filled with her failed attempts. Art supplies gathered dust, books piled unread, gifts accumulated in corners. The puppy grew bigger, learning to navigate around the debris of Mom's campaigns. Sometimes I'd catch her sitting among the wreckage, holding some abandoned tool of emotional manipulation, crying silently. She tried shock tactics, loud noises to startle me into reaction, sudden changes in routine to throw me off balance, even fake emergencies designed to trigger concern. I adapted to each disruption, maintaining my zeros through fire alarms at 3 a.m. and staged falls down the stairs. Mom's mood logs became fiction. She'd write 10s while sobbing, 1s while manic with plans, random numbers that had no connection to reality. She'd show them to me like evidence in a trial, proof that the system was broken, that numbers meant nothing. I'd look at her fabricated emotions and log another zero. School became complicated as Mom's interference increased. She'd email teachers asking them to report any signs of happiness, to notify her if I smiled or laughed. Mrs. Sebastian started intercepting her calls, protecting my refuge. Other teachers grew uncomfortable with the situation but didn't know how to help. Mom tried enlisting my father, despite their bitter history. He showed up one evening looking uncomfortable, clearly there under duress. They sat on opposite ends of the couch while I occupied the middle, both trying to parent me into feeling something. The visit ended with them screaming at each other while I went to my room and logged my zero. She started a blog about raising an emotionally numb teenager, seeking advice from strangers on the internet. She'd read comments aloud at dinner, trying different suggested strategies, essential oils, color therapy, sound baths. The house became a laboratory of failed experiments in forced happiness. Physical manipulation entered her repertoire. She'd try to manually move my face into a smile, holding my cheeks up with her hand. hands. She'd tickle me despite my age, desperate to provoke involuntary laughter. I learned to control even my reflexive responses, staying limp and unresponsive. Mom's sister staged her own intervention, not for me but for Mom. She arrived with pamphlets for treatment facilities, begging her to get help. Mom threw her out, screaming that she didn't need help. I did. Through my bedroom window, I watched my aunt cry in her car before driving away. The zeros had become my identity, my protection, my weapon. Each one was a small victory against the system that had stolen my childhood. Mom had taught me that happiness was dangerous, that feeling good meant punishment. Now I was showing her what she'd created, a child who'd learned the lesson too well. She tried one more therapist, someone who specialized in selective mutism, even though I wasn't mute. The woman attempted various techniques while Mom watched eagerly. Art therapy, play therapy despite my age, even hypnosis. I participated fully and silently, producing dark drawings and maintaining my zeros. Mom's final attempts grew more frantic. She'd wake me in the middle of the night to check if I felt different in my sleep. She'd hide my mood log to see if I'd panic without it. She'd fill out fake logs for me, trying to manifest happiness through sheer will. Nothing worked. The house reflected our mutual destruction. Peeling paint, overgrown yard, bills piling up from Mom's unemployment. The puppy, now a full-grown dog, was the only healthy thing in our home. I fed it, walked it, ensured it received the care neither of us could give ourselves. On my 17th birthday, Mom attempted one last grand gesture. She decorated the house, invited family, ordered a cake. As guests arrived, she pulled me aside and begged, actually got on her knees and begged, for me to pretend to be happy just for one day, to fake it for the relatives, to give her that gift. I looked at her there on the floor, this woman who destroyed us both with her need for control, and felt the weight of all our zeros. She'd created this system to protect me from the world's pain by causing it first. Now we were both trapped in the ruins of her love. The party proceeded with me as a silent center. Relatives sang happy birthday while I sat motionless. Mom cut the cake with shaking hands, serving slices I didn't eat. Gifts piled unopened on the table. The dog hid under the couch, sensing the tension that made our house unlivable. When the last guest left, Mom collapsed at the kitchen table. She looked at the remains of the party, at the cake no one had enjoyed, at the gifts that meant nothing. She pulled out her mood log and wrote something, then pushed it toward me. -10, it said, because I destroyed my daughter. I picked up my pen and wrote my response. 0, because she had. I stared at her -10, then at my 0. The distance between us had never been clearer. She pushed herself up from the table and shuffled to her bedroom, leaving me alone with the remnants of my failed birthday celebration. The next morning brought a new development. Mom emerged from her room carrying a suitcase, her movements purposeful for the first time in months. She set it by the door and returned to pack another. I watched from the kitchen as she methodically filled bag after bag with her belongings. She paused at my doorway, looking at me sitting with my mood log. Her mouth opened and closed several times before she turned away. I heard drawers opening and closing in her room, hangers scraping across the closet rod. The dog followed her from room to room, confused by the sudden activity. By noon, she'd loaded everything into her car. The house felt hollow without her possessions cluttering every surface. She came back inside one last time, standing in the entryway with her keys clutched in her hand. We looked at each other across the empty living room. She left the mood log chart on the kitchen counter, along with her stack of journals. I watched through the window as she drove away, not looking back. The dog whined at the door for hours afterward. I spent the rest of the day cleaning. Not the frantic, bleeding-handed cleaning Mom did when she was spiraling, but methodical organization. I threw away the accumulated gifts, the failed therapy tools, the remnants of her campaigns. The house slowly revealed itself beneath the debris. Mrs. Sebastian called that evening. Mom had contacted her, asking her to check on me. I assured her I was fine, that I had food and could take care of myself. She offered to stop by anyway, and I didn't refuse. She arrived with groceries and helped me figure out which bills were overdue. We sat at the kitchen table, sorting through the pile of notices Mom had ignored during her unemployment. The situation was bad, but not irreversible. Mrs. Sebastian helped me call the utility companies and arrange payment plans. Over the following days, I established new routines. Wake up, feed the dog, go to school, come home to an empty house. No mood logs, no hourly check-ins, no punishments for existing. The silence felt strange after years of constant monitoring. Mom's sister called repeatedly. I let the machine pick up, listening to her increasingly worried messages. She wanted to know where Mom had gone, if I was okay, if I needed anything. On the 5th day, I answered and told her Mom had left, but I was managing. She insisted on visiting. She arrived with more groceries and a determination to understand what had happened. I showed her the mood logs Mom had left behind, years of documented destruction. She flipped through them with growing horror, seeing the systematic way her sister had tried to control my emotions. Why would she leave her whole mood log collection behind when she packed everything else so carefully? Makes me wonder if those journals were meant as some kind of message or explanation she couldn't say out loud to her sister. We spent hours going through Mom's abandoned papers, finding bills, medical records, the blog she'd started about raising an emotionally numb teenager. My aunt read the comments from strangers who'd encouraged Mom's increasingly desperate tactics. Her face grew paler with each revelation. She wanted me to come live with her, but I refused. The house was paid for. Dad still sent support checks, and I'd turn 18 in less than a year. I could finish school here, maintain my routine, keep the stability I'd fought to create. My aunt reluctantly agreed, but insisted on daily check-ins. School became easier without Mom's interference. Teachers stopped walking on eggshells around me. Mrs. Sebastian no longer had to intercept calls about my emotional state. I continued helping her after school, grading papers and organizing supplies in comfortable silence. The dog adjusted to our new life faster than I did. It stopped looking for Mom after a week, settling into a routine of walks and meals and quiet evenings. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for the mood log out of habit, my hand finding empty air where the journal used to be. Dad called once, awkward and stilted. Mom had contacted him from wherever she'd gone, rambling about zeros and failed systems. He wanted to know if I needed anything, if I wanted to visit. I told him I was fine and ended the call. He didn't push. My aunt helped me apply for legal emancipation, gathering the necessary documents to prove I could support myself. The lawyer she hired said my case was strong, given Mom's abandonment and my demonstrated ability to maintain the household. The process would take months, but it would protect me if Mom tried to return and resume control. I found Mom's hidden stash of my old acceptance letters, the ones she'd claimed to throw away. They were tucked in a box in her closet, along with scholarship offers and program brochures. Most had expired, but community college was still an option. I started researching application deadlines and requirements. The house felt different without the constant weight of monitoring. I could laugh at TV shows without fear of punishment. I could have good days without documenting them. I could exist without justifying my emotional state to anyone. The freedom felt foreign and fragile. My former friend Sarah reached out through Mrs. Sebastian, wanting to reconnect now that Mom wasn't orchestrating our interactions. We met for coffee, awkward at first, but gradually finding finding our old rhythm. She told me how uncomfortable those forced visits had been, how obviously coached by Mom to provoke responses. Other friends followed, tentatively rebuilding connections Mom had severed. They'd all noticed something was wrong but hadn't known how to help. Now, without Mom's interference, we could slowly repair the relationships her system had destroyed. My aunt found a therapist who specialized in family trauma, someone who understood the complexity of emotional abuse. I attended sessions alone, no one coaching the therapist or monitoring my responses. For the first time, I could speak freely about what the mood logs had done to me. The zeros had served their purpose. They'd broken Mom's system, turned her weapon against her, forced her to confront the monster she'd become. But I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need to perform emotions or document my inner life for anyone's approval or control. Winter arrived with Mom still gone. Her sister had received a few postcards from various cities, vague messages about finding herself and starting over. She never asked about me or expressed regret for what she'd done. Maybe she couldn't face it. Maybe she was still at -10. I redecorated the house slowly, removing traces of the mood log era. The kitchen table where we'd compared numbers became a study space. The living room where she'd staged interventions became comfortable again. The house transformed from a battlefield to a home. The dog and I developed our own routines. Morning walks before school, evening runs to tire it out, quiet nights doing homework while it slept at my feet. We took care of each other, two survivors of Mom's war against happiness. My 18th birthday approached with no fanfare. My aunt offered to throw a party, but I declined. I'd had enough of performed celebrations. Instead, I spent the day filing paperwork for college applications, planning a future Mom couldn't sabotage. The emancipation was finalized a week later. The judge reviewed the evidence, including the mood logs my aunt had submitted, and granted my petition. I was legally free from parental control, responsible for my own choices and their consequences. I started community college in the spring, taking general education courses while figuring out what I wanted to study. The freedom to choose felt overwhelming after years of having every decision monitored and punished. I took it slow, one class at a time. Mom never came back. Her sister occasionally forwarded postcards, but I stopped reading them. Whatever journey she was on, wherever she was trying to find herself, it didn't involve me anymore. She'd made her choice when she drove away that morning. The mood logs stayed in a box in the closet, evidence of what we'd survived. Sometimes I pulled them out, reading through the progression from forced numbers to defiant zeros. They told the story of how I'd learned to fight back, how I'd turned her system against itself, but I didn't need zeros anymore. I didn't need to document my emotions or justify my existence. I could feel whatever I felt without fear of punishment or manipulation. The freedom was terrifying and exhilarating and completely mine. The dog aged gracefully, a constant reminder that some things could be simple. Feed it, walk it, love it, receive love in return. No logs, no comparisons, no performance. Just genuine connection without conditions or control. I graduated community college and transferred to a 4-year university, the acceptance letter arriving without drama or sabotage. My aunt helped me move into the dorms, proud of how far I'd come from the silent girl writing zeros at her kitchen table. The zeros had been my armor when I needed them most. They'd protected me from Mom's sickness, given me power when she'd taken everything else. But armor gets heavy when the war is over. I'd learned to set it down, to exist without shields or weapons. Sometimes I wondered what number I'd write if I kept a mood log now, but the beauty was not knowing, not measuring, not comparing. My emotions belonged to me alone, unfettered by scales or systems or someone else's pain. The girl who'd written those zeros had saved herself the only way she knew how. She'd turned emptiness into strength, absence into presence, nothing into everything. She'd survived by becoming untouchable, and now she was learning to let herself be touched again. Mom had taught me that happiness was dangerous, that feeling good meant punishment. The zeros had taught me that feeling nothing was its own kind of prison. Now I was learning the truth, that emotions were just weather, passing through without needing documentation or justification. I kept the final mood log, the one with Mom's -10 and my last 0. It marked the end of our war, the moment we'd both admitted what we'd done to each other. She'd destroyed her daughter, and I'd let her destroy herself. We'd both lost, and in losing, I'd finally won my freedom. The zeros had been my declaration of independence, written one empty number at a time. They'd been my refusal to play her game, my insistence on autonomy, my quiet revolution against her tyranny. They'd been exactly what I needed them to be, nothing that meant everything. Now I lived without logs or numbers or hourly check-ins. I woke each day free to feel whatever came, to exist without measurement or comparison. The girl who'd written all those zeros had given me this gift, the right to be human without documentation, to be myself without permission, to be happy without punishment. That was the final victory over Mom's system, not the zeros themselves, but what came after. The ordinary miracle of an undocumented life, feelings that belong to no one but me, and the radical act of existing without keeping score. Time flies when you're not overanalyzing every emotion, right? Appreciate you letting me tag along with my running commentary. Catch you next time, same chaos, different story.